The meticulously woven tapestry of my foresight was about to unravel his entire world, leaving him with nothing but the threads of his own hubris. The words hung in the air, a venomous echo in the otherwise opulent dining room. "You're not my real father. You could never understand what I need." Arion, my 23-year-old biological son, stood red-faced, triumphantly declaring his independence from me, from my values, from everything I had ever built. Around the polished mahogany table, my wife Clara flinched, my sister Eleanor gasped, and even my normally stoic business partner, David, shifted uncomfortably. Arion, emboldened by the stunned silence, gestured wildly with a half-eaten breadstick. "You're just a relic of the past, Kaelen. Your hard work, ethics are obsolete. I need capital, not lectures, to achieve my dreams." A real father would see that. His eyes, full of a fleeting, misplaced victory, momentarily met mine. I felt no rage, no hurt, only a profound sense of quiet clarity. It was a moment I had, in a strange way, anticipated for years. A lifetime of quiet observation had taught me that certain moments, no matter how painful, are merely the inevitable culmination of long-laid groundwork. I simply nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of my head, a silent acknowledgement of his declaration. His words were not a wound, but a signal. The game, which had been subtly unfolding for over 2 decades, had finally begun its final phase. He saw my composure as weakness, as defeat. He couldn't have been more wrong. He saw the end of his perceived struggle. I saw the beginning of his true education. The meticulously woven tapestry of my foresight was about to unravel his entire world, leaving him with nothing but the threads of his own hubris. To truly understand that moment, one must first understand the journey that led me there. I am Kaelen, and at 52, I stand as the founder of Kaelen Logistics, a company I built from the ground up, brick by painful brick. My hands, now softer from years of boardroom negotiations, still bear the faint calluses from the early days of loading trucks, balancing ledgers by lantern light, and driving endless miles to make a delivery. I remember the biting cold of winter mornings, the sweat-soaked exhaustion of summer nights, all fueled by a singular, unwavering belief in the power of grit and integrity. My parents, practical and hardworking, instilled in me the value of earning your keep, of building something durable, something real. They taught me that true wealth wasn't just about money, but about character, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of self-reliance. My relationship with Arion was, from his earliest days, a complex tapestry woven with threads of love, hope, and an increasingly frustrating dissonance. He was a bright child, quick-witted, charming when he chose to be. But an early seed of entitlement, perhaps sown by a doting grandmother or an overabundance of modern conveniences, began to sprout. While I preached the virtues of effort, he sought the allure of shortcuts. While I found satisfaction in mastering a skill, he found solace in the superficiality of acquisition. As he grew, the gap between our worldviews widened into a chasm. He saw my dedication to my business, my long hours, my careful investments not as a testament to success, but as a tedious, unnecessary burden. He viewed success as an innate right, a lottery when he was simply owed. I tried, of course, to bridge that chasm. I enrolled him in summer jobs within the company, hoping he'd gain an appreciation for the mechanics of enterprise. He complained about the early mornings, the physical labor, the perceived indignity of working alongside those he deemed beneath him. I encouraged him to pursue his passions, offering support for education, for apprenticeships, for anything that would foster genuine skill. He, instead, gravitated towards the burgeoning world of social media, convinced that viral fame was the ultimate shortcut to the lavish lifestyle he felt he deserved. His business ventures were always thinly veiled schemes to acquire rapid wealth with minimal effort: crypto scams, dropshipping fads, influencer marketing agencies with no actual clients. Each failure was met with a demand for more capital, an expectation that I would simply bail him out. It was during these frustrating years that I began to forge my secret weapon. It wasn't a hidden will or a vengeful clause, but a meticulously constructed labyrinth of legal and financial instruments designed not to punish, but to protect. Protect my legacy, yes, but more importantly, protect Arion from himself, from the very entitlement he embraced. Years prior, After witnessing the slow decay of a rival family business due to unchecked generational greed, I had consulted with a team of the sharpest legal minds and financial strategists. We drafted comprehensive trust documents, company bylaws, and estate plans that were ironclad yet flexible. The core principle was simple: meritocracy. My company, my assets, and my future wealth were structured in such a way that direct, unconditional inheritance was all but impossible. Instead, a series of performance-based trusts, educational grants, and opportunity funds were established. Any significant financial benefit was contingent upon demonstrable effort, ethical conduct, and genuine contribution, either to the company or to society. There were clauses for academic achievement, for philanthropic work, for entrepreneurial success, real entrepreneurial success, not just social media antics. Even access to basic living expenses for heirs was tiered, requiring submission of budgets, proof of employment, or enrollment in accredited programs. It was a system designed to incentivize growth, not stagnation, to reward earning, not merely inheriting. I never spoke of these specific structures to Arion, simply reiterating that nothing in life is given, everything is earned. He, of course, dismissed it as another one of my archaic lectures. I had built a fortress around my life's work, not to keep him out, but to ensure that if he ever entered, it would be through his own strength, not merely his birthright. In the weeks and months following Arion's public declaration at the family dinner, a superficial calm settled over our household. Arion, convinced he had broken free, became almost obnoxiously confident. He interpreted my quietude as a sign of defeat, a concession to his rebellious spirit. He spent his days in a haze of social media posting, attending exclusive parties, and networking with other aspiring influencers and crypto millionaires. He spoke incessantly about his upcoming revolutionary NFT project, a digital art collection that promised astronomical returns with no discernible underlying value. He expected my immediate, unquestioning financial backing. When my refusal came, delivered calmly, directly, without emotion, he exploded. Not with the public theatricality of the family dinner, but with a series of increasingly frantic and aggressive phone calls, demanding access to funds, threatening to expose my hypocrisy online. I let the calls go to voicemail. My responses were always the same: brief, factual emails referencing the terms of his existing modest stipend, which was tied to his enrollment in a community college course he barely attended, and the complete absence of any provision for speculative ventures. I offered to connect him with a career counselor, a business mentor who could guide him through actual enterprise, perhaps even a position within Kaelen logistics appropriate for an entry-level candidate. Each offer was met with a storm of derision. He escalated. He started posting cryptic, then increasingly direct, condemnations of me on his various social media channels. He painted me as an unfeeling tyrant, a Scrooge-like figure hoarding wealth, a father who didn't understand the new economy. His online followers, mostly young and impressionable, echoed his sentiments, filling my company's comment sections with vitriol. My marketing team alerted me, concerned about brand reputation. I simply instructed them to monitor, not engage. I knew this was part of his pattern: manipulate, inflate, demand, then lash out when denied. This time, however, his antics served my purpose. Every public outburst, every exaggerated claim of my supposed stinginess, every online tirade, served as irrefutable evidence of his character, or rather, his lack thereof. My strategic mind saw it not as an attack, but as data, confirming the wisdom of my long-term planning. I was not reacting emotionally. I was observing the final validation of my carefully constructed thesis. The quiet activation of the plan was already underway, a series of legal and financial maneuvers initiated by my team, invisible and silent as gravity, but utterly undeniable in their eventual effect. While Arion was busy broadcasting his perceived victimhood, the invisible walls I had built were slowly, inexorably closing in. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a closing door in a sterile lawyer's office. I had called an informal family meeting to discuss the future of the family's financial planning, a seemingly innocuous agenda item. Present were Arion, my wife Clara, who, though initially hesitant, had grown to understand and support my long-term vision, my sister Eleanor, and David, my loyal business partner. Also present were my principal attorney, Ms. Evelyn Reed, and my financial advisor, Mr. Thomas Vance, both pillars of discretion and strategic brilliance. Arion, dressed in a designer tracksuit and expensive sneakers, arrived late, radiating an air of bored impatience. He assumed it was another one of my attempts to lecture him, perhaps to offer a paltry sum if he finally agreed to get a real job. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice calm, resonating with a quiet authority that always seemed to irritate Arion. "Today, we're not just discussing my present affairs, but the future of the Kaelen family legacy." Arion rolled his eyes, subtly checking his phone under the table. "Specifically," I continued, meeting his gaze directly, "we're addressing the comprehensive framework I've established over the past 2 decades to ensure the longevity and integrity of what I've built, and how it pertains to future generations." Ms. Reed, a woman of impeccable professional demeanor, then took the floor. She began to lay out the intricate details of the Kaelen Family Trust, the Kaelen Legacy Fund, and the operational structure of Kaelen Logistics. She spoke of various subtrusts, performance clauses, and the merit-based allocation protocol, a system designed to distribute wealth not based on familial ties alone, but on demonstrated contribution, education, and ethical conduct. She meticulously explained how virtually all significant assets, including the company itself, were held within these structures, making them inaccessible for direct, unconditional inheritance. Arion's phone was still in his hand, but his thumb had stopped moving. His eyes, initially glazed over with indifference, began to sharpen with confusion, then disbelief. "Wait," he interrupted, his voice edged with a nervous tremor. "What about my inheritance? My share of the company? What about the money I need for my ventures?" I leaned forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. "Arion," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "there is no share in the traditional sense. The company is structured to be self-sustaining, managed by a board of directors, with any profits reinvested or directed into the legacy fund. Access to that fund, as Ms. Reed has explained, is contingent upon meeting very specific, measurable criteria." Mr. Vance, the financial advisor, then projected a complex flowchart onto a screen. He pointed to a small, almost insignificant box. "Currently, Arion, your access to any family funds is limited to the KLT 003 stipend, which, as your father mentioned, requires verified enrollment in an accredited educational program and proof of satisfactory academic progress. Your current status indicates you are not meeting these requirements, and thus, your access to that stipend will cease at the end of the current quarter." Arion's jaw dropped. "What? That's ridiculous. You can't just cut me off. I'm your son. I'm entitled to this." His voice rose, laced with panic. "I need that money. My projects, my life, everything depends on it." "That," I stated, my voice calm, cutting through his rising hysteria, "is precisely the point. For years, you've operated under the assumption that a lavish lifestyle, unchecked capital, and unearned success were your birthright. You publicly declared that I was not your real father, that I couldn't understand your needs. You felt entitled to what I built without understanding the effort, the sacrifice, or the wisdom it took to create it. You declared independence." I paused, allowing the gravity of my words to settle. "And so, I have simply formalized that independence. Every piece of advice I gave you, every opportunity to learn the true value of work, you dismissed. Every structure I put in place was designed to protect the very legacy you scorned, and to ensure that anyone who benefits from it truly understands its value. There is no loophole, Arion. There is nothing left for you to take, only what you can truly earn." His face drained of color. He looked from Ms. Reed to Mr. Vance, then to Clara and Eleanor, whose expressions were a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. He then looked back at me, his eyes wide, finally seeing not a weak father, but the architect of his profound, chilling reality. You set this up? For me? To leave me with nothing?" He choked out, the arrogance replaced by a desperate, palpable fear. "No, Arion," I corrected, my voice softer now, tinged with a regret that was more philosophical than personal. "I set this up to ensure that you, and any future generation, would have the opportunity to earn everything. You chose to squander those opportunities. The choices were always yours. And the consequences, my son, are also yours." The fallout was immediate and devastating, though remarkably quiet in its execution. Arion's initial reaction was a desperate flurry of calls to every lawyer he knew, every distant relative he could think of, anyone who might offer a lifeline. Each conversation, however, ended the same way, with the grim confirmation that my legal structures were irrefutable. There was no real father clause in any trust, no inherent right to wealth simply by DNA. The system was designed by the best, and it held. He tried to rally his online followers, launching a furious campaign against me, accusing me of cold-hearted manipulation and disinheritance. But without the promised wealth or the lavish lifestyle he had bragged about, his audience slowly dwindled. His friends, the ones attracted by his perceived access to wealth, quickly vanished. His business ventures collapsed without capital, revealing themselves as hollow shells. The social media influencer who flaunted luxury was now just another young man with an empty bank account and dwindling prospects. My wife, Clara, initially struggled with the harshness of the situation. "Kaelen, is there truly no other way?" she would ask, her voice laced with a mother's pain. But as Arion's true character revealed itself in his desperate, ungraceful dissent, his refusal to seek honest work, his continued blaming of everyone but himself, she began to see the wisdom in my actions. He needed this, she eventually conceded, her eyes reflecting a weary understanding. He couldn't see it until he had nothing to hide behind. My sister Eleanor, who had always been critical of Arion's entitlement, offered a quiet, "You did what was necessary, Kaelen." It took courage. David, my business partner, simply observed, and then, with a knowing nod, shifted his focus back to the sustainable growth of Kaelen Logistics. The company, insulated from Arion's antics by its robust structure, continued to thrive. Months turned into a year. Arion, stripped of his car, his luxury apartment, and his credit cards, eventually found himself adrift. I heard whispers through various channels. He tried moving in with friends, but his demanding nature and lack of funds quickly alienated them. He'd attempted entry-level jobs, but his arrogance and disdain for authority led to quick terminations. The last I heard, he was living in a sparsely furnished rented room, attempting to piece together an income from odd jobs, a stark and desolate contrast to the opulent future he had so vociferously demanded. I felt no triumph, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction that the lesson was, finally, being taught. Today, Kaelen Logistics continues its steady, prosperous course. My legacy will be one of innovation, integrity, and durable growth, not one fractured by inherited entitlement. I find a profound peace in my days, knowing that the principles I lived by, hard work, responsibility, and the earned dignity of self-reliance, now form the very bedrock of my family's future, ensuring that only those who embody these values will truly benefit. The journey with Arion was a painful one, a testament to the bitter truth that sometimes the greatest act of love is also the hardest. It taught me that true fatherhood isn't about giving your children everything they want, but about teaching them the value of what they earn. It's about building structures that foster character, not just comfort. It's about having the foresight and the courage to let go, even when it hurts, so they can finally learn to stand on their own. In life, you don't always get what you want, but you always get what you earn. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself.